Hello everybody, welcome to another Darkest Dungeon mod overview. My name is ElementFive, and today I'm excited to showcase another result of Red Hook's official mini-boss mod contest. This time the Incandescent Whisperer, developed by S-Purple, an actual bird IRL, a slightly startled seal, and smarmy Mormon Jesus. The Incandescent Whisperer is a mini-boss project that features the really top-notch artwork of S-Purple, wrapped around a super ambitious storyline, which includes multiple town events, a quest chain, eventually resulting in a boss fight which features 3 custom enemies, which come together in a sort of dark, sinister, and really punishing fight, which is just a ton of fun to play against. It's challenging, it's interesting, and it's really beautifully animated. And before we move forward on this, here is your obligatory spoiler warning, as I will be breaking down the fight, mechanics, rewards, and the quests which lead up to the boss fight in some detail, going over some of my own thoughts and experiences. So if you are looking to install the Whisperer and would prefer to learn it yourself, make sure to turn back now. But since most of you are here for a detailed breakdown of this boss and how to access it, let's wait no longer and get right into it. Now, according to the description on Steam, the Incandescent Whisperer is an ongoing boss mod which challenges the player to undertake a number of quests in service of a wandering priest, culminating in a desperate battle for survival at the gates of the hamlet itself. Around week 35, the hamlet will be visited by a wandering friar and his faithful bodyguard. Initially deigning to grant their aid to the hamlet, uncomfortable questions about the nature of the evil under the manor and the heir's connection to the ancestor inspires the friar to seek out the truth behind the darkest dungeon. What he finds there will shake him to his very core and set the stage for a confrontation between the heir's battle-hardened enforcers and the rallied peasants of the estate. Now, part of the reason this is an ongoing boss fight, as is mentioned there, is due to the fact that this is still in development and more is being added to this. We're just seeing now some of the bugs pushed out of this and a lot of the polish on it now. But also because if you defeat this boss, it will then trigger a small possibility of running into the fight again as a sort of random mini-boss in place of a fight in a dungeon down the line. So, in order to get rolling here, you're going to want to obviously first subscribe to the mod on Steam and make sure that it's installed on your save file. Reach week 35 or higher, at which point you'll get the first of a couple town events which simply are for story or flavor, and they give you sort of quest-long buffs to take with your parties here. You'll come back to the hamlet and start the first of 3 quests specific to reaching this boss, beginning with the Friar's Inquest. The population is reminded to maintain skepticism in the face of seemingly innocent questions from our honored guests, so as to prevent spread of unfairly biased hearsay regarding our estate's checkered history. So we'll navigate over to the world map here and spot this shiny new quest underneath the ruins. The friar has disappeared from the estate. He was last spotted heading into the ruins. Pursue the misguided holy man and ensure his safe return. Your goal is to activate one Mendicant Friar. Now, we ran into a hiccup here when recording this and found out that if you happen to have a boss fight in the ruins up here already in the missions, you need to complete that first to access this quest. Otherwise, it will not show. Rest assured, once you complete that boss, you can come back and do it. Nonetheless, we embark on this quest to find the Mendicant Friar and are confronted with this custom loading screen which says, "Witnesses say the friar seemed agitated before leaving the hamlet. He appeared to be seeking out unknown knowledge, but to what end none could say. He could not have gone far. Find him." Now, when I called this mini-boss project ambitious previously, it's in part due to this quest in particular, which is a large, non-randomly seeded dungeon with already set fights and map layout. This challenges you to navigate through this sort of mini labyrinth to find the Mendicant Friar, similar to the way that static dungeons work and feel in the Crimson Court. Again, this is a decently lengthy dungeon. It is listed as a medium veteran, and because of that, I found it helpful to think about bringing anti-stealth to a group as well as a decent amount of sustain because of the lengthy journey that you're taking through this. But once you do kind of move through and ultimately find the Mendicant Friar, all you have to do is activate him and this quest is completed. That then brings us to the next quest in the chain called Fool's Cross, employing you to gather 3 relic stones declaring that their significance emphasized, the friar sweetened the deal by offering his direct assistance in purging the hamlet of evil should these artifacts be recovered. And you are then tasked with gathering the Mendicant's relics. So we go back over to the map screen now and find this Champion Medium Wield quest. The friar has requested you seek out a number of ancient tablets, delve into the Wield, and do not return empty-handed. And we get this interesting warning here on the custom loading screen, declaring that the friar has been disappearing more often as of late, and the people look to him now for guidance more so than ever. Should tragedy fall upon the hamlet once more, it will be him the people turn to, and not you. Again, this is a randomly generated champion dungeon. It's nearly identical to the other sort of finding relics quests you may encounter in other dungeons, so you'll just need a decent wield composition and to find all 3 of the hastily carved stones, and upon doing so, we'll complete the quest, and then begin the final chapter as you are brought back to the hamlet and greeted by a major uprising of peasants. And as has been told by the story of the previous town events and quests, while exploring the hamlet, certain facts came to light that causes the friar to do an about-face and actually attempt to take control of the estate from the heir. So for the last time, we'll navigate over to the world map and find the quest located in the hamlet, just like Wolf at the Door, the Brigands encounter. Now, this is a champion boss fight in a single room dungeon like that you would find, say, encountering the Shrieker. So you can pack light here with the exception of necessary fight provisions. And moving into the final phase, we now know the extent of the friar's treachery is clear. But what would drive an otherwise peaceful scholar to incite a mob against you? Whatever his motivations, he must be dealt with. Show the populace that your hand is stronger and far more cruel. And we get this last look at this just awesome fanatic-esque shot here with the rabble and riot happening in the background. And as we load in, we are met in the hamlet, burning ablaze, with 3 custom enemies, the friar in the back leading the revolt, guarded by his trusty cleric, and the uprising rabble of peasants out front. Now, I just have to say on the onset of this here, before we get into the actual fight, I love the design and animation of these enemies. This team hit this spot on. This is a challenging fight, and the basic concept of this fight will play out just like the story. The friar has incited a riot against you, rallied a mob, and you'll have to defend against it and find some means of accessing and killing the friar behind the mob, withstanding the mob's damage, the powerful debuffs and stuns of the cleric, as the cleric regularly guards the vulnerable friar in the back, who also has extremely powerful healing mechanics.
Perched at the very precipice of oblivion.
Right, so now that we've made it here and we have a very clear understanding of what is actually happening conceptually in the fight, let's just hit pause for a second and take a look at each enemy and every little piece for a moment. The uprising rabble up front has 165 HP to start, relatively strong resistances, and 2 actions per turn, primarily from the use of their riot ability, which attacks multiple party members, does really decent damage and bleeds. And the kicker here is that they use one of their actions each turn to cast Uprising, which conceptually adds more peasants to the mob and effectively ramps the damage of the mob over time and increases the mob's overall health throughout the fight. It's a very clever design idea and should immediately tell you that this is an enemy that can get out of hand and be extremely difficult to deal with. Now, just behind the rabble stands the Cleric Errant, which serves as the Friar's bodyguard. It starts with 147 HP, 20% prot, 36 dodge, 5 speed, decent resistances, and uses his Holy Shield and Hammer to deal damage, debuff and stun your heroes, and an ability called Knight's Vow to guard the friar in the back, awarding the friar with an additional single block, which functions just like the Shieldbreaker's Aegis, consuming the full damage of a single direct attack. And finally, huddled in the back is the primary boss, the mob leader, the Mendicant Friar, with 105 HP, 44 dodge, 8 speed, slightly less resistances, and only a single action each round, which he'll typically spend on either extremely powerful restorative abilities on his own allies or direct damage attacks which mimic a very powerful version of Vestal's Smite. dealing damage but also healing himself. So you got the ramping rabble out front, which is constantly becoming tankier and dealing out more damage. You've got the sort of annoying guard-oriented, debuff-oriented cleric in the middle, and then you've got the weak friar in the back who is doing a ton of healing and some direct damage. Now, I went into this boss fight totally blind about what I was up against mechanically. What I immediately encountered, and lends to why I love this boss fight, is that same gnawing feeling you get against most DD bosses the first time you fight them. That you've got to figure out the pattern here and make the best of a bad situation, recoup from the losses of your failed experiments in the fight thus far, and just do the best you can to catch up. Now, killing the rabble is definitely possible, but I think not necessarily the most worthwhile thing to do. Definitely very difficult given just how fast the HP pool grows in combination with the power of the Friar's healing. So one major adaptation I made to this boss fight was in basically placing my Crusader on stun duty, just trying to stun the rabble as much as possible, slow their ramp and damage output, which was basically as good as a coin flip at best each turn anyway. This is where backline focus and reach feels like a mandatory for this boss fight, especially if you use this kind of strategy. And thus the Houndmaster and especially the Plague Doctor were just vital in getting through the fight, as I was not only able to stack blights on both enemies in the back with the Plague Doctor, but the Plague Doctor's grenades' initial attack damage also consuming the Friar's occasional Aegis, leaving the Friar vulnerable to direct attacks from Doggo. So ultimately, this strategy is actually quite simple and really turned the fight and just relied on the rest of my heroes guarding, healing, stunning, and sustaining long enough to get the damage out each turn and stack the blight high enough to eventually overtake the healing output of the Friar himself. Now, having said that, this was still a very challenging fight. I had multiple death's doors in this fight, some lucky dodges. We did make it to round 13 here, and I leaned very hard on the healing of my Flagellant, the dodge guard of the Houndmaster, and I was really just brutalized by the rabble throughout. So slowing the roll here of the rabble early on and getting a faster focus, I think, on the backline would have been much better.
And now the true test. Hold fast or expire.
Now again, these are powerful champion heroes with decent quirks and powerful trinkets, and I guarantee you can still bring a better comp here if you know what to expect. And I would say the Shield Breaker, which tends to be my go-to sort of S-class hero these days, the fact that she can reach the backline, break guard, pierce prot, etc., makes her kind of an instant winner on this fight for me the next time around. However, the Plague Doctor seems a real MVP on this fight, being able to stack blight and, as I said, consume the Aegis guard of the Friar and just kind of get it out of the way. I think ultimately this group would have just done much better to replace the Satyr with something like a Bounty Hunter, which would have maybe had an easier time stunning the rabble and would have been able to reach the backline with some marks to synergize with the Houndmaster or an Arbalist a little bit better. I think a Vestal is probably still the S-class healer in this game, especially due to the power of AoE healing here, and that would be nice against the immense amount of damage that's thrown at you in multiple ways and by the AoE attacks of the rabble. The Flagellant was kind of a weird filler take along here for me that ended up being sort of minimally effective offensively, except for the godlike ability for it to just bounce back from death's door and save my allies with some pretty exceptional heals. Though I do think that knowing what I was going into, I could have easily just swapped into Rain here and bled the backline with the flag, and that would have made it a lot more easier as well. So contrary to, say, the Banshee fight, which we covered in our last mini-boss video, this is not a multi-phase fight. It is fairly straightforward, but it is a bit of a race. It is a ramping fight. You've got to have a group with decent sustain. You've got to be able to kind of silence the rabble as much as possible and reach that backline. And I encourage you to think about and try out your own composition to this one, as it is just a beautifully themed and I think just amazingly animated and quite punishing fight altogether. But it doesn't end there. Upon completing the quest and defeating the boss, you're rewarded with some powerful trinkets to take home, 4 custom trinkets in total coming with this boss mod. And according to an actual bird IRL, defeating the boss means that it now has a rare chance to replace a normal dungeon fight with a repeat fight against the Friar and Cleric so you can punish the guilty all over again.
The formation is broken. Return the offensive.
There's just so many things I love about this. Big congratulations and thank you to the entire team behind this mod, and to S Purple and An Actual Bird IRL for their patience and extra info as we worked out some of the last bugs to make this video possible. And a big thanks to you guys for checking it out and supporting the channel. Do make sure to subscribe for more overviews like this one and everything else Darkest Dungeon. And let me know in the comments below what you think of this mini boss, the composition and strategy you would use to defeat it. And don't forget that we are now live again on Twitch. Be sure to join us at twitch.tv/ElementFive as we move into our new streaming schedule, taking on our modded Blood Moon runs, among other things, encountering all these new bosses and previewing new mods as they continue to be churned out. Thanks everybody, we'll see you next time.